What happens to a child who has nothing, no shoes to walk in, no bed to sleep on, no certainty of food for tomorrow, yet carries inside him a voice so powerful it could silence the noise of the world? In the heart of Manila's crowded slums, where the air is heavy with the smell of smoke and the cries of survival, lived a boy named Miguel Santos. At just 12 years old, Miguel's world was not made of toys or school books, but of torn slippers, patched clothes, and nights spent listening to his mother's weary sighs as she scrubbed strangers' laundry to earn a few pesos. Their home was nothing more than a shanty, its walls thin as paper, leaking when the rains came, shivering when the winds blew. Yet even in this fragile life, Miguel held something no poverty could take away: a voice so pure it floated above the chaos of the streets. Late at night, when the city finally grew quiet and only the hum of distant traffic lingered, Miguel would hum softly to himself. His mother, Rosa, often listened in silence, her tired hands pausing in midair, as if that small sound was enough to erase the weight of her day. The neighbors knew of his singing too. Sometimes, when the power went out and the entire neighborhood fell into darkness, Miguel's voice would rise above the silence. It carried not just notes, but hope that perhaps life was not only about survival. Still, hope was fragile. Miguel often sang on an empty stomach, his ribs pressing against his thin shirt. He sang with calloused feet and eyes that had seen too much of hunger. Every day, the question loomed: would his gift remain unheard, lost in the alleys of poverty? Or would the world ever discover the boy who had nothing, and yet carried everything in his song? Sometimes fate hides in the most ordinary of moments. For Miguel, it began on a hot afternoon when the sun burned harshly over the crowded streets of Manila. He was standing near a marketplace, singing quietly to himself as he helped his mother carry bundles of laundry. His voice floated through the noise of vendors shouting and tricycles honking. It was soft at first, but pure enough to catch the ear of a stranger passing by. That stranger was a volunteer from a local charity group, with a simple phone in his hand. He recorded a short video of Miguel singing, a video that would travel farther than Miguel could have ever imagined. Weeks later, Rosa came home carrying a letter she could hardly believe was real. Her tired hands trembled as she read the words again and again. Miguel had been noticed. The video had reached people beyond Manila, across oceans, all the way to the producers of a show the world knew: America's Got Talent. They wanted Miguel to audition. The letter felt unreal, almost like a cruel joke. How could a boy with no passport, no money for travel, no decent clothes, possibly stand on a stage in America? Rosa wept that night, torn between fear and hope. She had always prayed for a miracle, but miracles often came dressed as impossibilities. Miguel, though, held the paper to his chest as if it were life itself. He had never seen America, never even dreamed of aeroplanes or glittering stages. Yet something inside him whispered that this was not an accident. His songs, sung from hunger and hope, had finally found a way beyond the narrow streets he knew. That night, under the flickering light of a single candle, Rosa made a choice. They would go. Even if it meant selling what little they had, even if the journey was impossible. Because sometimes a chance is all the universe gives, and it was enough to change everything. The day of the audition arrived like a dream wrapped in fear. Miguel had never left the Philippines before. Everything about America was overwhelming: the towering buildings, the endless lights, the busy airports. Yet nothing compared to the moment he stood behind the heavy black curtains of the AGT stage, waiting for his name to be called. He clutched the microphone with trembling hands. His clothes were simple, borrowed from a kind neighbor who believed in his journey. His shoes were slightly too big, making him shuffle nervously as he walked. All around him, the stage buzzed with cameras, flashing lights, and the chatter of thousands of strangers. For a boy used to narrow alleys and small crowds, it felt like stepping into another world. The curtain parted, and Miguel walked out. His heart pounded in his chest, echoing louder than the cheers of the audience. From the judges' table, Simon Cowell leaned forward, his sharp eyes scanning the boy. Next to him, the other judges exchanged curious glances. Whispers spread through the hall. Who was this shy child with thin arms and timid eyes? Miguel's voice trembled when he introduced himself, and the audience shifted uncomfortably. To them, he looked like a boy too fragile for a stage so big, too small to carry a voice that could matter. Doubt rippled across the room, unseen but heavy. Then came the silence. The music started. Miguel closed his eyes and drew a deep breath. He remembered the nights in Manila when he sang to drown out hunger, the moments when his mother's tired smile gave him courage. Slowly, he lifted the microphone closer. The first note slipped out, faint and shaky. A second followed, then another, and with each breath, the tremor faded. His voice began to rise, pure and clear, filling every corner of the hall. The crowd leaned forward, their skepticism melting into awe. For the first time, the bright lights no longer frightened Miguel, they embraced him. That small boy from the slums of Manila was no longer invisible. He was becoming a voice the world could not ignore. As Miguel's voice climbed higher, the air inside the theater shifted. What had begun as a whisper of sound grew into something larger, something almost sacred. Each note carried a story of nights spent hungry, of dreams too fragile to speak aloud, of a boy who had nothing but dared to give the world everything he had. The audience, once skeptical, now sat frozen in awe. Mothers in the crowd clutched their children's hands a little tighter. Strangers wiped tears without knowing why. The song did not need words for them to understand. It was pain and hope woven into melody, a prayer disguised as music. Miguel's eyes remained closed, as though the stage itself had disappeared. In his mind, he was back in the narrow alleyways of Manila, singing to the stars above his fragile home. But this time, the stars had multiplied into thousands of faces shining back at him with wonder. As his voice soared toward its final note, the theater erupted. People leapt to their feet, clapping through their tears. The sound of their cheers rolled like thunder, shaking the walls of the hall. Miguel, overwhelmed, lowered the microphone and stared at the sea of faces before him. For the first time in his young life, he saw not pity but pride. At the judges' table, Simon Cowell leaned back, his eyes glistening in a way few had ever witnessed. Known for his stern critiques, Simon now looked at Miguel as though he were seeing a miracle unfold. Then, with a single decisive movement, Simon pressed the golden buzzer. The moment exploded into gold. Confetti rained down from the ceiling, shimmering against the lights. Miguel stood frozen, his small hands reaching out as though to catch proof that this was real. The stage trembled beneath the weight of applause, the world finally hearing the voice that once belonged only to Manila's dark nights. Miguel had stepped onto the stage as a boy who carried nothing. But in that instant under the shower of gold he had given everything, and in return received the world. The confetti had settled, but Miguel's life was forever changed. Overnight, the boy who once sang in the shadows of Manila's streets became a symbol of hope for millions. News outlets across the world replayed his performance, calling him the boy with the golden voice. His story spread far beyond the theater into homes, classrooms, and hearts that had never heard of him before. Back in the slums where his journey began, neighbors gathered around tiny televisions, their eyes wide with pride. Children who once sang alongside Miguel in the alleys now pointed at the screen, shouting his name, believing for the first time that perhaps their own dreams could matter too. Rosa, his mother, wept silently as she watched her son receive standing ovations from strangers halfway across the globe. Her years of sacrifice, of washing clothes until her hands blistered, had carried Miguel to this very moment. For Miguel, the transformation was more than fame. He no longer sang just to escape hunger or silence pain. He sang to give voice to every child who felt invisible, every mother who prayed for a miracle. Each performance carried the weight of those who had nothing and the light of those who still dared to hope. With opportunities came blessings Miguel could scarcely believe. He was offered education, mentorship, and a future that once seemed impossible. Yet, through it all, he remained the same boy who sang barefoot in the dark, humble, grateful, and determined to use his gift for something greater than himself. The boy who had nothing now held everything, not just success, but love, dignity, and the chance to inspire the world. His journey was no longer only his own. It was a message whispered to every forgotten corner of the world. Sometimes, those who begin with nothing are the ones who end up giving the world everything. And so, Miguel's song did not end with the golden buzzer. It became a hymn of hope, echoing far beyond the stage, reminding us all that miracles often rise from the humblest places.